got to be kidding me. This game has like 3 characters in it. Let's change that. There's not much more to say to that. We're diving into the world of r/BossFight again today. I just needed the camera angle to change so I can do this. Let's create some chaos. The sound was beautiful. All the instruments playing together in perfect harmony. The crowd was enamored as the music swelled to the most climactic part of the piece. David waited nervously. This was his big chance. His drum alone was the big finale, and if he was even a second off, the whole performance would fall apart. Unfortunately, David's sense of rhythm was iffy at best. He'd been practicing for months for this one part to varying degrees of success. One day, he'd be right on the money and time it perfectly, and then the next day, he would lose count and wildly miss his cue. No matter how many times he tried it, he just couldn't get it consistently. The last notes rang out as the rest of the instruments finished their respective parts. David had to allow exactly 2.5 seconds of silence before the final drum hit. He began counting the seconds to himself, trying his best not to be worried about losing time. He raised his hammer and brought it down perfectly on the drum. But as he did so, sparks of electricity erupted from the impact and short-circuited all the lights in the orchestra. In the pitch blackness, the crowd stared in awe. Soon, the whole theater was illuminated once more. Only this time, the light source was from David, with bolts of electricity jumping across his body. I don't know how to start off these design notes here. I don't really have a good intro sentence, so I'm just going to leave this in as the actual start to design notes. But for this picture, and a couple other ones in the past, mainly the Has-Been Hotel as Redeemed Sinners from last week, I've started taking pictures of myself to use as reference, granted as close to the reference as I can. Like for this one, obviously I can't jump up in the air and swing a giant hammer, but I did take a picture of myself off to the side where I have more leg room and did the whole swinging motion, because when I drew Miss Delight on stream a couple of weeks ago, I tried to do the same thing, but the swinging motion was a little off. So I took a picture of myself doing it and used that as the reference from here, and it looks so much better. There's so much more movement to his body pose, whereas Miss Delight was like front and center and then just kind of like this. Whereas this guy is swinging back. You can tell he's ready to strike. And for the sake of making this piece make more sense, we'll just say his other arm is completely blocked by his body. Shh, don't tell anyone. I didn't really know how to place it, so I didn't draw it. Shh. However, I will say, I don't know if I'm in love with how I rendered the lightning. I like it a lot better how I did it during the community redraw with Comic Fan 13's submission with the lightning arcing across the fingers. Here it seems a little stiff and maybe a little too thick. With a little bit more practice, I think I'll get the lighting down. But for now, I like it, just not as much as the last time I did it. And overall, for this round of boss fight redesigns, I wanted to sort of heavily lean into the redesigning phase of it. Whereas in the first round, especially for Brass Panda and Safety Violator, I really just kind of drew them as they were. Like, I took Brass Panda, Raccoon with a machine gun, and drew it as Raccoon with a machine gun. Here, I wanted to push the boss fight part of it a little bit more and redesign them to be more like cool video game bosses, like something you would come across in Dark Souls, or not exactly Mario, but you get what I mean. And so for this one, I gave him a little insignia on his arm of a lightning bolt going around a little swirl to resemble a treble clef, and drew a staff of music bars of pure gold going down his coattails, which I really like. I also gave him, it's a little hard to see in the final piece, but I gave him a, what is it called? Half note? I think I gave him a half note tattoo on his neck, just just for a little something. It really doesn't add anything, but I just kind of drew it in the sketch and just left it there. But let's take a look at Thor-Chestral. Mike buried his head in his hands. He knew he was innocent, but that never really meant anything in court. There was just too much circumstantial evidence pointing him to be the culprit. To make it even worse, his lawyer wasn't even there. Although Mike didn't expect much from them. The cheapest lawyer he could find was from some shady website, and they didn't even have a picture of themselves. Mike only hired them because his options were severely limited. Mike had tried messaging his lawyer to get an update on their arrival, but he was either met with no answer at all, or just complete gibberish. With no more ideas on how to stall, Mike hung his head and allowed the judge to begin the trial. The judge raised his gavel and was about to slam it down when the courtroom door flew open. Every attendant turned to look at the new arrival. Standing in a wrinkly blue suit was Mike's lawyer. The room was silent as they clumsily shuffled their way to the stand and took a seat next to Mike. Mike tried to silently drill his lawyer about where they'd been, but they only gave him a dead stare before facing back to the judge. As the trial began, the prosecutor called up the first witness and asked them for his recount of the story. Then, it was time for Mike's lawyer to cross-examine them. However, instead of rising from the seat, they flopped onto the table face first. Their suit began folding and contorting in all sorts of unnatural directions, and then it went still. Once again, all eyes in the room were fixed on Mike's lawyer as the cloth began to move again, and a tiny kitten popped its head out from the suit. Apparently, for each round of this redesigning r/boss fight, I have to include one animal drawing. It happened with the first episode with Brass Panda, and now it happened here. And, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I just thought it was funny that both times so far have included one animal drawing. And to continue the trend of animal drawings in this series, I figured I might as well give the cat lawyers here a fully rendered background like it did with Brass Panda. Even though I technically did kind of cheat that one because I roughed in one and then added motion blur. But I think the background came out pretty good for a less-ish minute decision, even though the perspective might be a little off. But I think the bad perspective is hidden behind the cat and the table. The cats and the table. And between this drawing and the Lackadaisy characters as zombies video, I think I really like drawing cats. I'm really getting more and more comfortable with my fur rendering style, or rendering fur in my style, I should say. And, you know, I really like how it's coming out. This one, I do think the shading of the fur came out a little better in the Lack of Zombies episode, but it's still, I really like how it is here. I also like how there are 3 different types of cats. I didn't just use the same colors for them. So there's a black cat, a gray cat, and an orange cat, which I thought just added a little more diversity to the piece, especially since everything else is so brown, with the whole walls and the benches and the woods and the tables and whatnot. But it really is cool. And I like, as I said in the first drawing, I'm trying to push the redesigning of this one a lot more. So instead of just drawing 3 humanoid cats in suits, I like this idea much more of like 3 cats, or however many it would take, stacked on top of each other and posing as a human until they just kind of fall apart and they just all poke their heads out of the suit. And if you notice for the suit, I took, in terms of color and design, I took a lot of inspiration from Phoenix Wright from the Ace Attorney series, mostly because the Game Grumps are currently going through that game right now, and I've been enjoying that playthrough. And going off that, let's take a look at Feline Wright, Ace Cat Tourneys. Such a ridiculous name. The doors closed with a loud crash that echoed off the walls, cutting off all light to the castle. Thalicus used his sword to create a spark and lit a torch, providing the two with a faint glow as they moved through the halls. After a long trek through the dark, The two knights came upon a throne room. It was just as dark as the rest of the castle, but as they approached the throne, they saw a woman in a red dress being suspended from the ceiling by her arms. She was crying and screaming for someone to help her before the monster came back. Thalicus handed off the torch to Harkard and drew his sword, before putting it back and taking out a crossbow instead. He wasn't the best shot, but from the way the woman was tied up, there was no way he could reach the ropes with just his sword. He loaded a bolt, aimed the mechanism, and fired. The bolt soared through the air and severed one of the ropes tied to the woman's arm. Thalicus readied another bolt, took aim again, and fired. But this time, he wasn't so lucky. Thalicus aimed too low, and the bolt struck the woman in the head. Her body went limp immediately as she hung above the throne by one of her arms. Then, a distorted, sinister laugh rang throughout the throne room as the woman's body began moving again. She started moving in unnatural ways. Thalicus noticed that her dress was shifting and becoming more liquid as it made its way up her flailing body. From somewhere behind the woman, a red humanoid figure appeared with crimson droplets dripping from its hands. The figure laughed again as it took hold of the woman's head and snapped her neck as it traveled up the rope and escaped into the throne room's rafters. This by far was probably one of the coolest posts I've seen from BossFight. Obviously, BossFight is supposed to be a humorous kind of subreddit where it's like, wow, look at this crazy thing. But in terms of like a character design, like an actual boss fight, this one looked so cool and I wanted to do it. And for this one, I took heavy inspiration from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and really treated the blood being, or bloodline as I came to call it, as a sort of stand, even though in the story I wrote, it's not exactly that. And as you can see from the reference picture, the original author of the post mentioned attack patterns in the comments, which I didn't get a chance to look at before starting the drawing, so I didn't really take those into account while drawing the image. But when writing the story, because the stories were very last minute, I was going to just do design notes like I did the first round and throw in my ideas for the story. But I figured I'd write quick blurbs just to explore the characters a little more. And some of these characters I really would like to explore further and maybe work into a greater narrative, this one included. Going into this one, I knew it was going to be hard to top the cat lawyer's picture, because I think that one might be my favorite of the episode, even after drawing this. But I do really love the difference in texture on this one. There's a clear distinction between the blood being, the gold bracelet and shoulder pads that the woman is wearing, and the dress. And I think it all came together really nicely while being different. And if you look really closely at the final result, there's a sort of skull kind of pattern on the top of the dress where the, I guess the breast and goes down into the stomach area. I just kind of used the folds to be like the lines you would see on a skull and crossbone. It was kind of unintentional, but I liked the way it looked, so I did decide to keep it, even though if it kind of messes with some of the lighting of the piece. But overall, I think it's just a little bit more of a subtle thing that shows the maleficence. Is that a word? The evilness, that's it, of the blood being. And this is my favorite concept-wise of this episode, although it's probably my second favorite drawing. But I hope you enjoyed it, and let's take a look at Bloodline. I gotta say, I'm so glad I did another one of these. This might be one of my favorite topics that I've done for the channel. It's just really cool to see like these crazy things the internet posted and reimagining them into a little bit more, air quotes, serious video game But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you want to see more, why not check out the first round of redesigning boss fights up here. And something else down here. And just a quick little note that next week, instead of a new video, it'll be a compilation of a couple of old videos, just to give myself a little break before I come back swinging for the Artist Collab on March 29th. My name is KyngPin Creations, and I will see you all next time. Take care, everybody.